Today I'm going to show you how to set up your B2900 to source a sweep after receiving an external hardware trigger. Let's get started. As you can see, we have a 33220 function generator acting as our hardware trigger, and that goes into the back of the digital I/O port of the B2900. So first things first, we need to set up that digital I/O port to receive an external hardware trigger from our function generator. To do that, we need to get to the I/O menu at the bottom. Once there, we go to Digital I/O and then Config. We have the external function generator going to port or pin 13 on the back. So select pin 13 here and change digital in to trigger in. And we're going to change the polarity from negative to positive. Hit apply. Okay. Alright, so now we have set up our B2900 to receive an external trigger on pin 13 of the digital I/O. Now we need to set up the sweep parameters. To set up the sweep parameters, first we must show the sweep, and here we can select, turn it off to on. We can select linear single, double, we can select a log type sweep, or a list. But for this demonstration we're going to use linear single. Select that, and then choose your sweep parameters. 5 volts here. Change the number of sweep steps also to 11. Then you'll notice our sweep step size is 500 millivolts. We need 11 points because the first sweep step is always 0 volts or 0 amps, whatever mode you have the B2900 in. Okay, now we have the sweep parameters set up. The next thing to do is to set up the trigger system on our B2900. To do that, let's first quickly review the B2900's trigger system.
Here we have the B2900A trigger system. There are 3 separate layers to this trigger system. There is the idle, ARM, and trigger layers. In order for the B2900A to perform an action, such as outputting the next step of a sweep or taking the next measurement, it must first go through this flowchart. In order to do that, the instrument must first be initialized to be taken out of the idle state. To initialize this instrument, you can either send the initiate skippy command if you are programming the instrument remotely, or you can hit the trigger or auto key. Once initiated, the instrument will enter the ARM layer, where it will wait for an arming signal. Once an arming signal is received, the instrument will then go to the trigger layer, where it will wait for a trigger signal. And once the trigger signal is received, the instrument will perform the next action. Now, if we set the trigger count to anything but 1, anything above 1, after one device action is performed, it'll go back and wait for another trigger signal. So say if we set it to 2, a trigger signal is received, we perform an action, we go back, we go to the event detector again, receive another signal, perform another action, then we'll get out of the trigger layer. Similarly, this will happen with the ARM layer as well. If we set the ARM layer to infinity, or the ARM count to infinity, the instrument will never leave the initiated state. It will always be ready to accept another trigger signal and will never enter the idle state.
Okay, so now we need to set up the ARM and the trigger for the B2900. To do that, we must first hit the trigger menu and then go to config. And here we can configure our trigger and ARM the way we'd like. So let's go to the ARM layer. For this, we will set the count to infinity, meaning that the instrument will never become deinitialized, and we will set our trigger source to the digital I/O pin 13, where we are receiving the external hardware trigger. Let's do the same thing for acquire, for the measurement. Infinity, external pin 13. Okay. Now let's configure the trigger layer. We need to make sure that we are triggering the number of sweep steps we have. So our sweep steps, you can see a little bit right here, is 11. So make the trigger count 11. And we would like, let's just call it. Okay, now let's just leave the trigger source set to auto. Let's go back and do the same thing for transient, for the output. Set that to the sweep steps also, 11. All right, now we're done. So let's hit apply, okay. Now we have set up the arm and the trigger layers. So let's show trigger, because we still have to set up the trigger from the front panel a little bit. Let's choose manual here. And let's add a delay for demonstration purposes of 1 second. Okay, now we are all set up. We have set up the sweep, we have set up the arm trigger layers, so we should be good to go. But first I want to show you one cool trick for chopping up your sweeps. If we go to config, source, sweep, we can see that the output after the sweep we can change from either the end value of the sweep or the start value of the sweep. So since we're going from 0 to 5 volts, we can either, once the sweep has completed, we can either set the B2900 to source 0 volts or 5 volts. Okay. All right. So now the B2900 is configured and ready to go. Because I have a 31 kilo ohm resistor connected to the B2900, let's change the current compliance to 200 microamps. Alright, let's turn channel 1 on. And to initialize the instrument, we have to hit the trigger button first. And you'll notice the arm indicator is displayed at the bottom. So now let's go ahead and trigger B2900 from the function generator. And you'll notice that we will sweep 500 millivolt steps to 5 volts. And the arm indicator still shows up, meaning that we are still initialized, ready to go, ready to accept another hardware trigger because we set the arm count to infinity. So if I trigger again, we sweep again. And that's it. This was a quick tutorial on how to sweep your B2900 Series SMU via an external hardware trigger. Thanks for watching.